Welcome to the College Podcast. I am your host, Matt Carpenter, joined today by Peggy Keogh, and our focus today is going to be unpacking all the specifics, or at least the big ticket items with the big, beautiful bill that passed through Senate, but specifically, how is it going to impact the college landscape? So we will talk about the timing. When is this going to happen? The Pell Grant, what changes did or did not happen? The federal Parent Plus loan, and with that, the federal direct student loan. Different repayment plans, specifically through federal government loan options. 529s, what are the changes there? Specifically how it impacts high school payments. And then college accountability and the endowment tax, which are very much intertwined there. That's where we're going to end today's episode. So lots to unpack, and thanks for showing up. Okay, Peggy, we are back. It is post 4th of July. We're in the thick summer up here in the north.
Yep, and you ushered it in with your fun vacay with your family.
My tan coming through as well as I would like it to.
But it's not red, so that's a good thing. I'm not a dermatologist, but I will say that's a good thing that you're tan and not red. So
8 days at the beach in a row.
Do have color, but you can't really see it on this camera because I'm out.
Another button down?
What?
Another button down or no? Here's good. All right. Yeah, well, so good to be reunited. I hope I know Ashlyn got to go swimming a lot. So hopefully that was fun. Your first fourth in your new digs in Tucson. And we got some stuff to talk about this week. So this big beautiful bill finally kind of went through and a lot of unknowns, right? And now we know, or at least we know a ton more. Not that all the dust is settled, but specifically when it comes to our world, higher education, college, we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Again, maybe a few loose ends, but that's what we're here to talk about today. And we'll kind of rip through each one of these and have a conversation about it. But Peggy, why don't you get us started? Well, I guess before we get any just like summary thoughts before we go into a kind of play-by-play of each, but of just like your knee-jerk, good, bad, and different. I mean, where's your head at there?
It was kind of what I expected. When I went to the Senate, I figured some things would be softened because it's just the way that the Senate kind of rolls versus the House. And that's kind of what happened. I figured they'd push something through and get it done. I won't go into some of my thoughts of some of these senators and what they did, but it's passed. So, I think the big thing, we always talk about, you and I, control the controllables. Here it is. It's in front of us. We're going to talk high level about it today. As things move on, there's going to be more and more details and info. And of course, we'll be sharing those. But I think certain things stayed the same, which was good. And there's certain changes that I don't think they're the end of the world. I think some of them might actually help people, even though they seem like they're bad. It might help people from not getting into too much trouble with debt. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't think it's terrible. They completely put in $10 billion for the Pell. So they did back up some stuff. So, there's some things and it depends on your family, honestly.
Yeah. Well, look, I got to tell you, like my basic knee-jerk here, and again, famous last words, but I'm like, I feel like this is a net positive, right? I'm not in love with everything, but the things that I was most scared of, none of those came to fruition, right? So I'm not looking at, too many of these, if anything, going like, my goodness, this is a massive mistake that's going to hugely negatively impact, all sorts of people. Is it going to be the first perfect bill? Of course not. But let's be clear, right? Just like we've said from the beginning, number one, this is not an imperfect system here, right? This is not it ain't broke, don't fix it type of deal. It is broke. Okay, so any change, hopefully in the right direction, is a positive. But again, nobody's been able to solve this in the last, few decades since this has got out of control. So again, I'm largely like pretty happy with it. And again, hopefully we'll see how it plays out, of course, in practice. But
just to be clear for our audience, we are talking about the higher ed pieces of this, not the bill in general. I'm speaking for myself personally. I do not have the same feelings about the whole bill in general. That's a conversation over a cold, frosty beer, a long conversation, and maybe several beers. But we're focusing today on the higher ed piece, and that's when Matt shares that and I share, it's not so bad. That's where we're coming from on that piece, not all the other stuff that we're not going to talk about on this podcast.
Yeah. Important clarification. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so timing, Peggy, when's this going into play? Who's it impacting?
Yeah, so it goes into play July 1, 2026. That might seem like a weird date to people, but it isn't to Matt and I. That's just kind of, that's when the changing of the guard, if you will, happens in financial aid. So what that really means is the 25-26 school year, it doesn't go into play. All the things that we're going to talk about are as of July 1, 2026. So if you're a high school kid and you're going to start in 2026, well, yeah, that's gonna affect you. Or if you're younger, if you're in college, and we'll talk about it, that's going to affect you differently. If you're rising, about to be a college kid in a month, doesn't affect you for the first year.
Yeah, exactly. So the seniors that just graduated from high school, class 2025, they're under kind of in your term here, Peggy, the old guard. It's these rising high school seniors, class 2026. Changes are going to impact them, and then of course for the sophomore year, and so on in college. So and to your point, that July 1st, that's kind of our fiscal year, the college's fiscal year. That's kind of where everything resets here. So second item here, let's talk about the Pell Grant. And before I pass the baton, I just want to say I basically looked at this, and I'm oversimplifying here, and I'm like, this is much ado about nothing. I think I say that especially because on this very podcast, I was actually crying real tears thinking about, got ahead of myself there, right? Thinking about, if some of these proposed changes went through and who it would impact and whatever. I had a real visceral reaction to that. That didn't happen. So Peggy, what did or didn't happen? Walk us through that. And actually, why don't you back up and just tell us what a Pell Grant is for somebody that's tuning in for the first time?
Yeah. So Pell Grant is a federal grant. So that means free money. You're not paying it back. Obviously, you have to be eligible. So this is for lower income families. And there's a couple grants that the government gives, but this is the main one. If you're Pell Grant eligible, it's a great grant to get. You can get it for all 4 years. So the maximum Pell Grant has been going up for years. The last couple of years, it stopped going up. The good news is they were talking about lowering it, and that's not what came out on the signed bill. So the maximum Pell, and not everybody gets it, you have to be eligible. Yeah, you have to be eligible to get maximum, but you could get less, is $7,395 per year, and your eligibility is assessed every year. So that's good news that they didn't lower it. It's the same. I wouldn't look to expect it to increase annually like it used to do, but at least it didn't go down into the thousands, which is what they were talking about. Another thing that didn't happen, so it's status quo. So if you have a child in school and you are receiving the Pell, they were talking about increasing the number of hours a student would have to take in order to be eligible for the maximum Pell. They didn't, that change got thrown out in the Senate version. So it's still 12 hours a semester, 24 hours for the whole school year. So basically same for those two. There is a change in what your Pell Grant can be used to pay for. So we want to talk about this concept of direct expenses that you pay to a college versus indirect expenses. So direct just basically means, which makes sense based on the word, that's what you're paying the college directly. So freshman year, it's the lion's share. It's room and board, it's tuition and fees. It could be books that hit up there, whatever you're paying the university for. Everything else is considered indirect. So that's personal expenses. Usually books are indirect. They don't show up on your bursar bill. For the Pell, you're going to have to use it to cover direct expenses. So that's something that families are going to want to understand, because when kids aren't living in dorms, the only direct expense could be tuition. That's the only thing you're paying the college directly. So you want to make sure if your child gets other money, other aid or merit-based aid, that you're talking with the college and making sure that you don't lose your eligibility for Pell because they say, oh, well, you got this other scholarship and that's paying for your tuition and fees, and there aren't any other direct expenses because your child lives in an apartment off campus or whatever, like mine did. that's just, I'm getting a little in the weeds, but I'm just planting that seed. That's a bit of a planning, understanding thing. So that's something, direct expenses you've got to use the Pell for. And then another positive is they expanded the different programs that you can use the Pell for. There's some they're calling it Workforce Pell Grant program. So it's not the traditional 4-year. So that's a positive. So kids that aren't necessarily following the quote unquote traditional track, if you want to call it that, you'll be able to use that Pell if you're eligible to pay for those expenses. So I think all of this on the surface is pretty good.
Agreed. My kind of Cliff Notes net summary from a meta level is like, look at this program is designed for the families and the students that need it most, right? Those are the least amount of resources that are trying to go pursue a college degree. So the fact that it's not being reduced and in some ways, albeit not a direct dollar amount, expanded, that's a great thing, right? Especially when we looked at what some of the proposals were that, you couldn't use it for part-time and that whole deal. So again, I'm looking at this, I think, right? We will see, but largely as a net positive here. Next topic here, arguably, or at least I think one of the biggest, most impactful changes here is the PLUS loan. Okay, now the PLUS loan, this is the federal government borrowing program for parents that are sending their kids to college. Okay, so if I'm a parent and my kid is going to pursue an undergraduate degree for college, I can borrow through this program. And it's something that it's by far the most popular parent loan, right? They have massive kind of market share here. One of these things that started out with good intentions, but it's spun out of control a little bit. And most of us, and for those of you that listen, you've heard Peggy and I say a version of this more than once. It's on the short list of variables or causes for why we have this explosion in college costs, this runaway train in college costs, because basically the federal government are telling the colleges, every family is going to get a blank check, charge whatever you want. I'm oversimplifying, of course, but that's kind of how this thing has spun out of control and how it's worked, right? That's what's happened within the system. So that's kind of what the PLUS loan is. Historically, you could borrow unlimited amount, right? So the maximum amount for college. That's what's changing. So Peggy, why don't you talk about the changes and just kind of your thoughts on them?
Yeah. So basically, as Matt said, you used to be able to borrow if you didn't get any money from a college, you could borrow the whole cost of attendance for all 4 years. And it was pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get approved. So what they've done is they've put a cap on the Parent Plus loan, and they call it the Plus loan, but we continue at CAP to call it the Parent Plus loan. So we want to make it clear, it's a parent that's getting this loan. The student's not involved. So for the Parent Plus loan, it's capped at $20,000 a year, but it's also capped at $65,000 per student. So it's not $20,000 a year times 4, obviously, because that would be $80,000. So basically what that means is if a school costs $60,000, you can bring $30,000 to the table, and in the past, you could get that Parent Plus loan for $30,000 each year. Remember, not this year, but in subsequent years, you're going to be able to get 20. So there's still going to be a $1,000 gap. And then when you get to junior year, you're not going to be able to senior year, you're not going to be able to even get that full 20. So this is something to realize and plan for. It's also something, if your child is currently in school and that's in your strategy for down the road, you should think about it this year, this 25-26 school year. Because remember, this isn't going into effect until the 26-27 school year. So you might want to think about it. At the meta level, and I've shared this on this podcast, I'm not a huge fan of these loans because I think it allows people, like you said, Matt, they have a blank check to pay for something that they really can't afford if they're getting tons of money every year on this. And the government makes it super easy to get this loan. The private market might deny you most likely, or give you an absurd interest rate to take on the risk for people that just have very bad credit. And that's where you kind of have a come to Jesus moment in my mind, where you say, okay, this isn't affordable. And putting these caps, I think, is going to help people not get into, it's still a decent amount of debt. 65,000 over 4 years is still a lot of money on top of maybe other loans that you have. Don't get me wrong, but it like having the cap personally.
I'll tell you what, I think I'm in love with it because what have we always said? I mean, one of the biggest problems with this, kind of ecosystem here is that there's no guardrails, right? The consumer is just out there on their own going up against too much of a sophisticated system. And these colleges and again, the whole system, they're just a lot smarter than the average consumer, right? And what do we get, approaching $2 trillion in student loan debt? And I just always use the example of I think most consumers are like me and less so like you, Peggy, just not as disciplined. Where and I always use this as example because I think most people can understand it. If I went to a bank and they just told me, hey, brother, go pick out whatever house you want. We'll lend you whatever it costs. And I would just bet on myself, hope that I could pay it back, very likely get in over my own head. And again, I think that describes just most consumers. And that's what happens in college. There is no guardrails. There is nobody telling you, hey, look, you can't borrow more than X amount for this investment because it's odds are against you, right? And by the way, these loans cannot be forgiven in bankruptcy, right? Unlike some other loans. So what I'm seeing here, and I think the math is a little bit interesting, I'm seeing the federal government say, look, if you, as a family unit, we're not going to let you borrow more than $100,000. And I'm saying between a student and parent or parents, because they're saying 65,000 and then 27,000 with the federal direct student loan. So every student is entitled to borrow up to 27,000 through that federal direct student loan program. So almost on the nose of $100,000, or again, as a unit, $25,000 a year are the guardrails that we're putting around just kind of everybody. Now, there's ways around this, right? Peggy, that the private lenders are going to use this as a marketing opportunity. The plus loan only allows you to borrow 20,000.
Yeah.
Or 100,000 times 4 years, right? So it will be a marketing opportunity for them. But I'm choosing to be optimistic in that the federal government putting these kind of restrictions here is going to influence at least a percentage of families to be like, we got to kind of stick within this, right? Like we got to figure out how to make this happen in such a way that between the student and parents, we're borrowing $100,000. So and again, of course, that's not going to be everybody, but I'm in love with the concept. And I think we need more of just having those, helping the federal government coming in to help us get out of our own way as consumers here. Right.
Well,
And of course,
and you brought this up before too, but just even on the college side with how they price, this has been sweet for them because it's like, here's your Parent Plus loan, no skin off their back at all. Parents, will say, oh, I want to make my child's dream come true. This is the answer. And yep, I'll take it. And the college, like I've said, is laughing all the way to the bank. They don't really care if you're ever going to retire. They don't care if you've got your Social Security payments being, pulled away because you still haven't paid these off. They don't care. And I'm not saying that to be negative, but it's just a fact. I mean, that's not who they are. So to your point, there still is the private market. There still are state loans. So there's other places families can go, but it would be interesting to see if this kind of changes some of their pricing models because not as many families are going to be able to do this. So we'll see. We'll see if that's going to be something we'll see over years, not a quick flip, right?
Agreed. But I don't think we're being naively optimistic to be able to see a path. Just as markets do what markets do, prices come down as a result of this.
Well, and I would just say, the Peggy planner and me, for people that are looking at this going, oh, that means we can't send our child to this school. Switch your thinking that there's other options, right? That means it's not affordable. So it's probably not good for anybody, right? So this might create a little bit of angst in this process. But I think in the long run, if you choose other options that are more affordable, it's just going to be better for everybody anyways.
And I don't want to go too far off script here, but we'd be remiss not to say, and again, you hear this, I say this all the time if you tune in, but if you're new, do not, when you're thinking about affordability for a particular college, don't get tricked by that sticker price. Don't get tricked by that cost of attendance. Just because the University of Chicago is $100,000 a year, that doesn't mean that's what you pay to go there, right? So again, we say that ad nauseum, but again, if you're just new to this, that's just something that I want you
Yeah,
to keep in
discounting
mind.
is the name of the game, so you got to understand that.
Okay, so this was another kind of concern of mine, and I wasn't alone here. What's going to happen with these repayment plans or repayment programs for federal student loans, whether that's a Parent Plus loan or a Graduate Plus loan or a federal direct student loan? There was some concern about some of the changes here, but why don't you tell us what we know, Peggy, and where we land?
Yeah, so again, this is all tied on this July 1, 2026 date. There's different ways you can go into repayment based on what you earn. There's just, we won't go into it. There's an IBR, there's a SAVE program that Biden put in, and then pay as you earn. Those are all valid right now. But as of loans that are going to be dispersed on or after that July 1, 2026 date that we keep talking about, there's going to be two options. There's going to be a traditional repayment that's going to be it's going to be a fixed monthly payment, and it's going to be anywhere between 10 to 25 years. We don't know all the specifics, but that's more of the traditional. Then there's going to be a new plan that they're calling RAP. You know, we love all of our acronyms, but that stands for Repayment Assistance Plan. And that's going to be a monthly payment based on your adjusted gross income. So basically what you make and what you're putting on your taxes and the number of dependents. And so there's going to be a $10 minimum monthly payment, but we won't go in the details of it, but it's certain percentages depending on how much you make, not in existence now. And the key thing is if you're in current plans, even as of July 1, 2026, you're in loans that were dispersed before that, you will not have to immediately switch over to one of the two plans. You can remain in that plan. We'll see as they give out details because they're throwing out a July 1, 2028 date to have to make a switch, but that's 3 years from now. So we don't need to get in the weeds on that. But the takeaway now is if you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, we're about to take out Parent Plus loans, is that going away? No. You will be in your plan and they will keep you in there because that was a loan that was dispersed pre-July 1, 2026. So they basically simplified it. There's going to be two options going forward. And we can get into later down the road is RAP good? How does that affect families? But right now we're just doing, meta level, what we've seen get passed in the bill.
Yeah, and I won't go into detail with what my biggest concerns were because guess what? They're not coming to fruition, at least at this time, when it comes to these repayment options. And I like the word that you used. That was one of the things that jumped off the page to me. It's simplified things, right? Pretty straightforward here. I think that's a lot of the challenges in this ecosystem is the lack of simplicity and transparency, and it leads to confusion. It's easy to make a wrong decision, right? Where it's just like, all right, easy enough. If I want to get on a standard loan repayment plan, 10 to 25 years, boom, there I go. If I am not in a position after I graduate from college and I'm in that repayment phase to make monthly payments that are, within that standard repayment plan, right? I'm not making much money. I'm unemployed, underemployed, whatever. Now I can get in, on this RAP program, right? Where my monthly payments are going to be capped based on essentially the income that I am taking home and the size of my family, et cetera. So great. And that kind of concept of that plan, right? We have like 5 different ones out there now. So they almost consolidated all that into one, which again, I think it makes it pretty straightforward for consumers. Do you want A or do you want B? And this should be, again, fairly straightforward what the best fit is for you. So again, I'm calling it a win, especially with some of the options that were proposed. Okay, so Peggy, we don't need to take up too much airtime with this because pretty straightforward, but I guess it's worth mentioning. 529s, again, give us your Cliff Notes version of what that is and the new change that's going through specifically as it pertains to fines in high school.
Yeah. So 529s are basically college savings plans that the IRS created. We did a couple podcasts and got in the weeds on these, so I recommend you check those out for sure to get more information. But they've expanded how you can use it, basically. So this is a win-win. You can take out more to pay for K through 12. You've always been able to take out 10,000. Now you can take out 20,000. The financial planner in me is like, be careful because if you've earmarked that for college. If you take it out for secondary, it's gone, right? But some people do it for secondary. So that's a win. You just want to do your planning. And then the other piece is there's more programs, kind of similar to Pell can be used for more programs. Now 529 withdrawals will be qualified, meaning you won't pay tax on the earnings for more programs. And that's a win. Kids that aren't going to a 4-year program or a 2-year community college. So I think both of these changes are big, and we'll get into more details on them. But just if you have 510s, just keep that in mind that it's there aren't restrictions. It's opening up. So that's an overall positive for sure.
Yep. Okay, so these last kind of 2 points we're going to hit on, I think, are very much in the same category, if that's the appropriate word. It's one that we're collectively in favor with, at least in spirit, as it comes to, some of these changes. And that's college accountability, right? Colleges having some tangible skin in the game for the end results of students and families that are investing in their colleges and universities. And then there's endowment tax, which, again, we don't need to spend too much time on. Again, those two things are very much related, but why don't you give us kind of your takeaways and any details you want to share there, Peggy?
Yeah, so the endowment tax, we talked about this. There's basically it's going up, but if schools are less than 3,000 students, then they don't get hit with it. So if your child's going to a small liberal arts college, it's not even going to be a thing there, right? So Grinnell lobbied very hard and was heard. So that's the piece. It's just a higher endowment tax for the colleges. So that's a strain on their cash flow potentially. The other piece that Matt just mentioned, the college accountability. We're not going to get in all the details because I want to really see how this plays out. But basically, programs at colleges, they could lose federal student loan availability if the students that they graduate fail earnings tests. They're really trying to make sure that colleges aren't graduating kids or grad students even with tons of debt, and then they're making less than a high school graduate with a diploma, right? So that's high level what this is about. So that did make it through, and that did get signed by Trump. So how that gets translated and the specifics of it, we'll keep you posted. So those are the two pieces that are hitting the colleges. I think what matters for families of kids in school or about to be in college is these could be strains on the college, and the endowment tax definitely for some schools. So could this affect how much money they have for that discounting Matt was talking about? No, you shouldn't pay sticker price. Well, that's because colleges are discounting. It's not all because of the Pell Grant, right? It's because the colleges are using their funds to offer discounts of various types. That how they do that at a given school, we like to call that their business plan, could change if they have strain. So that's just another thing you want to have in the back of your mind. That's why you want to know these things. You don't need to know them in the weeds, but you need to know it because that could affect your bottom line down the road. But I think the accountability is huge. Because again, these colleges, like we were talking about earlier with the Parent Plus loan, it's like, oh, you graduate, you have 200,000 in debt, here's your diploma. Good luck, right? The accountability piece, they need to kind of be a part of this. They need to have a little bit of ownership of who they're graduating and how they're functioning in the world or not functioning financially and being able to, support themselves. So that's my take on it, and high level, those two things that are hitting at the college level.
Yeah, and again, the spirit of this thing, absolutely love it. Devil's in the details, remains to be seen exactly how this is going to be measured and ultimately executed, right? I think there's a ton of question marks there, but I'm loving the spirit of it. And to me, this is another stakeholder, one of the main ones, right, in this ecosystem that is going to have hopefully some guardrails, help the consumer have some guardrails. Right now, colleges have no incentive. I don't want to say none, but they don't have enough incentive, okay, to say we know that this family, this student is probably borrowing way more than they should, getting in over their heads, but we'll take the money, and if it ends up being a bad result, tough luck for them, right? That's kind of how it works right now. It's being a little bit harsh there, but I'm not exaggerating too much, I don't think. So if this works the right way, or I think the way that it's intended to work, they're not going to say that anymore. They're going to have to take a closer look to say, is there a reasonable expectation that we can get a return on the investment for this family. And of course, this all assumes, let's not forget about maybe the most important stakeholder, the student and the family. They got to go there and put forth their best efforts and go, take care of their job, right? And do, what they're supposed to do in all this. Again, I love it. One thing that I just, really neither here nor there, but one part I found interesting about this endowment tax was that it would only impact colleges above 3,000, because right away I said there must be a lot of high fives going on at these NESCAC campuses, right? The Amhersts and the Williams and the Middlebury. So I thought that was interesting of some of these schools.
Yeah, and I would have liked to see that be a little bit based on still how much money do you have in it? Yeah, the small liberal arts college that doesn't have a huge endowment, I get it, but like Williams,
Same.
really,
Exactly.
so that's where, maybe but then if you get two, but if you're this and this, I mean, who knows? There's accountability, and now it's there. Like, this has been fought by the higher ed, obviously the lobbyists hugely. So it did get through. So I think it's a positive that it got through, and then we'll see. We'll see how it plays out and how it's going to affect things. But yeah, not a bad,
So, I
not a
mean, look
bad
at
stir.
And so again, on the whole, I think in summary, in terms of like when we look at worst case, best case, in my mind, these changes that went through are much closer to the best case scenario than the worst case. It would be unfair to have, expectations that it would be perfect, at least from our point of view. But again, with all the doom and gloom around, I think that we've been feeling and fear around how these changes could impact higher education. This is the most optimistic I felt in a long time. So that's a great thing. So
yeah, I mean,
Peggy,
we were like, for example, we were concerned the subsidized loan would be thrown out. And if you don't know what that is, it's just a loan that the government pays the interest until 6 months after graduation. And the good news is it was put back in the Senate version, and Trump signed it. So that hasn't gone away. That helps low income families. The Pell isn't being reduced. That helps low income families. And so those are huge wins for equity and full access to education for all. I mean, we have a long way to go, but we got to take our wins as they come.
That's right. We'll enjoy it. And obviously, we will keep everybody posted. Please like us, follow us, continue to listen to us. Obviously, we're staring at this stuff every single day, doing our best to digest it and educate you all in real time here. So,
yeah, and definitely join us next week. I will have one of our experts from our team, Dan Bizig, who we affectionately call Lasso, behind the scenes. He's an admissions and a financial expert, and I'm going to just hit him with questions all about the Common App, because the Common App's coming. You already have access, but then it does its little thing and goes live officially August 1. So he will be offering insights, thoughts. So you definitely don't want to miss that one. I will learn with Dan as well.
Ted Lasso, you can't miss that one.
Nope, can't miss that one with Lasso. So
we'll see you soon, pals. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Matt Carpenter, along with co-host Peggy Keogh. We hope you learned a lot. Hope you're feeling a little bit more optimistic about this big, beautiful bill, again, specifically as it pertains to college here. Today's episode, as always, was produced and edited by Eileen Campbell. And we will see everybody next week. Please like us. Please follow us. And next week's episode will focus on the Common App. Thank you.